Okay. There we go.
Okay, perfect. Well, I'll just get us started. But first, thank you, Andrew, for speaking on this topic. I'm super excited about it. My name's Brooke. I'm the Director of Outreach for Fusion Academy, Houston Galleria, and Sugarland. We have 80 other campuses all over the U.S., but we are one-to-one school, private school, and it's fully accredited. And we serve students that struggle with ADHD, anxiety, depression, and really provide them an environment to be able to thrive and work through things and be that resource for them. So thank you.
Yeah, and I think I could press take it from here. Yeah.
Sorry, we'll do a few more introductions. So Julie will go next, and then Pam, and then me, and then I'll introduce you, and then you can get started.
Perfect.
Hey, everybody. So I'm Julie Pomerantz, and I am the admissions director at the Hub Houston. And at the Hub, everyone is heard, understood, believed in. We now have 4 different programs, 3 of which are for young adults ages 18 and up. A couple are in the daytime, and there's one in the evening, which is a social club. And then we also have our school, which is approximately ages 13 to 18. We mostly work with young people who are on the autism spectrum, yet we also work with others with severe ADHD, anxiety, mild depression, medical issues, etc. I'm happy to be here today, and Andrew, I'm excited to hear your presentation. Thank you.
Okay, I'm Pam Esser. I'm director of the Attention Deficit Disorders Association. We offer support groups and workshops. And right now we currently have 5 free virtual presentations per month on a variety of topics. And then we have workshops throughout. Our next one's going to be in April. We're starting a project on adoption and fostering in ADHD. So glad we're getting a few more people to come in. And I will tell everybody, I got to see Stephanie Alexander last week. She had a booth next to mine at a conference, so it was really nice to say hello and chat.
Well, I'm Alexandra. I work here. I'm the assistant director at Houston Neuroscience Brain Center. I work with Dr. Swatzyna, who is the director of the Brain Center. And here we do EEGs to look for neurobiomarkers that could account for symptoms, and also use the EEG reports to help guide medication selection. We do therapy for all ages. I work with the children and adolescents, and we provide neurofeedback training for people who have anxiety, depression, learning disorders, brain injuries, and more. And we provide a brain camp in the summer for kids, teens who want to do intensive training. And so it looks like Dr. Ron wants to say something too. Here, let me use my computer.
Okay, guys, good morning. I'm glad to, or afternoon, glad to have you all here. I don't like that. Let me kill this. Okay. Hate looking at myself looking sideways. The reason I wanted to bring Andrew on is we've worked with Andrew. Oh gosh, I've known Andrew for many, many years over at Lindamood-Bell, and I think it's a very valid thing to consider with kids struggling in school is to really address how they learn differently. This is something that Lindamood-Bell, he'll explain more of that, does really well to try to address the needs of these young people. And like I always say, in spite of good tutors, good teachers, and good parents, sometimes kids still fail to learn, and we've got to see what that is. So between the two of us, we look for the big issues that are preventing them from learning. They look for the learning styles. And when we do neurofeedback, it's a good combination because we can lay the basic pathways, and then Andrew's group can make those pathways grow and become really, really functional, because you need that exercise. So that's why I brought Andrew into this. I really, I think a lot about them and their system, and I do love that they're really research-based. So Andrew, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ron and Fusion and Hub and the ADDSR. I am really happy to be here and share a little bit about Lindamood-Bell and some of the research we've been involved in. Just to quickly introduce myself, my name is Andrew Wexler. I'm the center director of our local Houston Lindamood-Bell Learning Center, but we do have centers all throughout the US and overseas. I think we hover around 50 permanent learning centers. And so we are often nearby any of those big cities, but we've also been seeing students online since about 2015. So we've been able to reach those students really wherever they are. I am a native Houstonian. I lived a little while in Missouri, a little while in Dallas area, but I love Houston and all it has to offer and the wide diversity it has here. And so it's always a pleasure to get to help students and connect in the area. I am planning on sharing a little bit of a slideshow with more information about Lindamood-Bell and our approaches to instruction. And then after that, I'm going to just pull up kind of like a PDF of some more information about some of the university level, peer-reviewed level research that we've been involved in too. One big thing to know about Lindamood-Bell, a lot of people kind of on first glance think of us like a tutoring company, but we really are not that. Number one is because we want to do remediation for the underlying sensory cognitive processing for the students, not necessarily helping them with math or science homework. And then the second reason is that our approach to instruction is to do an intensive intervention to really help close those gaps in a meaningful and long-lasting way. So while we can sometimes help on more of that tutoring or curriculum side of things, we really specialize in that intervention piece. So, what's in the name? Lindamood-Bell Learning Center. We're founded by Pat Lindamood and Nancy Bell. And really, the two of them, when they first got together, they wanted to both acknowledge and help serve basically all students. We see students from age about 4.5 on up, including adults. And we want to make sure that they can read and comprehend to their potential. We work with a wide variety of students, whether those weaknesses are specifically in reading, specifically in that language comprehension or math areas, or whether or not they have prior learning differences, diagnoses like dyslexia, autism spectrum, ADHD is especially prevalent these days, dysgraphia, so forth. Sometimes we see students who some of their scores or most of their scores are already in the average range and they just need a boost or kind of a mind set reframing to help make school easier as well. But, ultimately, we do not want to be serving students in a manner that is maybe, quote, spinning the wheels or just providing like a Band-Aid like some tutoring might. We really want to do evidence-based instruction to solve that underlying issue. And that research is incredibly important to our founders. We have a whole division sector of the company that takes part in all of that. We want to actually differentiate instruction per the student so that we can target exactly what's holding them back, do exercises and strengthen those, I think strengthening the neural pathways to help those behaviors change, see a response to how they intake information differently. For any student that's going to start with us, they're going to begin with about a 4-hour learning ability evaluation that really lets us do a deep dive into almost all of these different component parts of reading and comprehension that you can see here in our quote unquote reading circles. We use this visualization to show how not any of these one skills takes place in a vacuum. It's a Venn diagram because they all do overlap and affect each other, especially when you compare these inner circles, which is more like the actual act of reading the words. We glean comprehension from all of that, right? Just to quickly break it down, a lot of times parents, even some teachers, will think of reading as like 3 main steps. How well can you sound out words you've never seen before? We call that word attack. Once you sound out a word 2 to 3 times, you should start instantly recognizing it. Call those sight words in early grades, right? Once you're recognizing most words by sight, you should be able to put that together with your vocabulary and context clues to smoothly read those paragraphs. All of that with the goal of comprehension. And of course, we can break comprehension out into a few different areas as well. Direct recall. Do you remember what you just read or heard? Critical thinking, can you apply to more higher order questions? Following multiple steps of directions, executive functioning, and so forth. So all of this can have an impact, both if you have difficulty reading, you might have difficulty understanding, but likewise, if you are not understanding what you're reading, sometimes that can follow that you'll have difficulties actually reading the correct words. So we want to look at all of these pieces, but especially important for us are, you see listed up here, sensory cognitive functions that underlie those component parts. And yes, we do check in on the phonological processing or like phoneme awareness for a student, but the orthographic processing and concept imagery for a student is going to be even more important for us. So there's 2 types of imagery that we really specialize in remediating, and this is really important for these students. They can have hours and hours of reading remediation, but if we're not fixing the underlying issue, which is often a difficulty in forming imagery, then they're not going to benefit from that instruction at maybe their typical school. So on one side of the spectrum, if you will, here, we've got Buzz, who's having a weakness in symbol imagery. And symbol imagery is the ability to see the letters for a word in your mind, kind of like a mental chalkboard. You can see him visualizing the letters for the word short here. Likewise, I could say to you all in this group, what's the 3rd letter you see in the word people? And you don't have to write it down to tell me that there's an O there. You can see that in your mind. Maybe you glance up and really see those letters. Maybe it's more of an unconscious process for you at this point. But that ability to hold that sequence of letters in your brain is really, really important towards reading, not just for applying towards sounding outwards, but especially for instant word recognition and helping overall fluency. On the other side here, we see Sophie, and she may be having difficulty in concept imagery. Now, this is a different kind of imagery where we're talking about the ability to form a mental movie for any language that you're taking in. So whether that's oral language, like you're listening to a class lecture, or you're listening to dad give you directions or anything like that. You have to form that mental movie to really understand. And or also reading comprehension, clearly. You'll notice the definition here says imaged gestalt or whole. I think we use that kind of fancy wording to emphasize that I'm not talking about somebody with a quote photographic memory or a quote visual learner. I would imply actually we're all visual learners. The Gestalt imagery is really talking about your ability to form that dynamic sequence of events in your mind so that you can see, you know, not just what the main character looks like, but visualize the background, visualize where it is, and see the other pieces interacting. So we have different programs. One is called Seeing Stars to help Buzz here build that imagery for symbols in his mind. Another program called Visualizing and Verbalizing to help build concept imagery for Sophie to make that comprehension easier for her. Now, I'm talking a lot about imagery, and again, to go back to all of the research validation for our programs, want to let you know that our instruction is aligned with the dual coding theory of cognition. Dr. Alan Pavio was the one that I think originally coined this and did some of the leading research going back to the 70s. And short version of the dual coding theory is that for any language to have meaning, there must be imagery associated with it. That's how we all process language. It's the coding between the verbal and nonverbal systems. Verbal meaning that actual word, nonverbal meaning that imagery behind it, right? And the way or the extent to which our brains are able to immediately translate those two between each other is going to really make an impact on how well we can read or comprehend that information. So just to go a little deeper, thinking about a student like Buzz, we might see him struggling with word attack. We might see him, oh, sorry, I see a hand raised. Did somebody have a question?
I'm sorry, this is Stan Stratton, and I'm an interested parent, but rather than breaking my neck taking notes, I was curious, will this be available to us to review?
Yes.
It's very informative, and I'm taking notes, but I would rather focus on what you're saying. So thank you.
Yes, this is very interesting stuff. So today I will be uploading this to our Houston Neuroscience YouTube channel, and then Brooke will be sending out a link to the recording to everyone who registered.
Yeah, and of course, I'll be available for additional questions, or you can reach out to me too and cover more. Okay, so I was just sharing a little bit more about some of those symptoms that we see for students with a weakness in symbol imagery like Buzz here, weakness in sounding out words, weakness with sight word recognition, weakness in spelling, especially if they can't even spell phonetically. You know, you see something like this for the word opportunity. They're missing a bunch of those phonemes and sounds in there. Difficulty putting it all together to read fluently. Sometimes students will have some of these upper skills, but they can't quite fit it all together. Maybe it's just super slow, even though they can be accurate. And sometimes they'll have that dyslexic label. If we think about Sophie on the other side, weakness of concept imagery, we'll see that cropping up often as a lack of comprehension. either in reading comprehension, oral language comprehension, or both. Difficulty with critical thinking and problem solving. This one's a big one for me because sometimes we see those students who are good at memorizing and kind of regurgitating back answers, especially elementary school seems to train them to do that sometimes, but it doesn't always transfer to being able to critically think and problem solve. Following directions. Well, maybe all parents think their kid has a difficulty in following directions when it comes to chores, but you might see sometimes that popping up more at sports practice and stuff like that. When you're like, all right, Sophie, run to the 50-yard line, turn right, jump over the cone, and then head back here. She gets confused and needs those directions repeated. Difficulty with verbal expression. We see this a lot with students on the spectrum sometimes who they might understand very well, but it's really difficult to explain that, or in other words, give us the mental movie that we need to understand what's in their brain. That can extend to difficulty in writing, difficulty with grasping humor in social situations, as you can probably experience, but also imagine. So again, we have to go back to thinking about these types of imagery and how we can remediate for those students. So I don't want to spend too much time just talking about Lindamood-Bell and all of our specific methods towards this, but to give you a big picture, when we are working with students, most of the time we're doing one-on-one instruction, although it can work well with small group instruction as well. We do require that students see us 5 days a week, so Monday through Friday. That intensity is non-negotiable for me, basically. This says 1 to 6 sessions a day. I normally tell my families I need at least 2 hours a day if we're going to really have momentum. And as I mentioned before, we do have online sessions or in person. Here in Houston, we have our main location near the Galleria area, but we do try to open up seasonal camps in Katy and the Woodlands areas. It's been a little while, COVID kind of hampered some of those seasonal camps from opening up, but I'm hoping we can get back to it, reaching those families in those areas a little bit easier. But take note, I've said this already, but we are going to differentiate that instruction. Not every student needs help in symbol imagery, so we're not going to do that if we don't need to. If I'm seeing a second grader, their instruction is likely going to look a lot different than if I'm seeing a 10th grader, right? We can scale up and adjust these programs based on what they need. Just quick note, we use tons and tons of positive feedback and Socratic questioning to help overcome some of what you might imagine are students will have some behavioral challenges, or at minimum, some task aversion, because when they're working with us, we're typically asking them to do the thing that is hardest for them for multiple hours a day. So sometimes, at least when they first start with us, they're not very happy to be doing some of that work, and we've got to come up with different motivation strategies, but that's a little bit besides the point in a way. Again, I don't want to just hype up our specific learning center, but just to give you an idea of some of the internal research that we do. This is comparing students' pre and post-test scores within our learning centers as a whole. But you can see here quickly, students who received just decoding instruction with us, average hours of instruction here are listed as 107 or so. That would be about 5 weeks of like a summer program if you're doing like 4 hours a day, just to give you an idea. And in that, let's say 5.5 weeks or so, you do see significant jumps in these percentiles for these students. So symbol imagery, that being that underlying sensory cognitive function that we know is so important for the rest of the reading skills, we see a big jump. Phoneme awareness going up, word attack or sounding out, jumping up, and so forth. You'll notice that the paragraph accuracy, this is a component of that paragraph or contextual reading fluency. This is almost always the hardest one to move. And you can kind of see it's like the last domino to fall in some ways. So students will often need some follow-up sessions with us on a less intensive manner to just help keep working that, get up into the average range. But you can see their comprehension jumping from that boost in reading as well. These are the standard score changes for those same sort of tests. And if you know about standard scores, you can tell that all of these are quite large jumps. Thinking about comprehension, kind of on the same side of things, we'll look in their vocabulary, word opposites representing their expressive vocabulary, and then comprehension on the paragraph reading test all going up. You can see those standard score changes as well. Vocabulary being a little bit harder to turn around in a short period of time, especially because we're not teaching to the test, but we see those other pieces raising up as well. So now I can get into a little bit more about some of the academic research that we've been involved in. I'm just showing these briefly, but I'm about to stop sharing my PowerPoint in order to show you some of these specific abstracts. And Stan, I do see your hand raised, but I wanted to make sure you all got
Sure.
my direct phone number here too.
And this may be something that I would address directly with you. I just noticed there was an age difference in the standard scores for the first group, and then the comprehension. So back here, we're back in 9, average age about 10.
Yes.
And then we move forward and we're in the 12. This is not a criticism, just out of curiosity, is that something that would indicate it's more important that they have been exposed to this at 10?
So what I read into that difference, and it is just based on the students that we happened to be seeing,
Okay.
it's more that a lot of times those comprehension struggles do not become apparent to the parents until the students are a little bit older. Because like I said, it seems like, especially early elementary, they're just sort of reciting facts back. And some of our students, even without that critical thinking or good concept imagery, they can kind of do that processing. Or, they can read the page, so the teacher thinks, oh, they're reading just fine. But those comprehension struggles sometimes take a little longer for the teachers and parents to catch on to. I think that's more indicative.
Makes perfect sense. And I again, I'm sorry to interrupt if this is something that ought to go later.
No, I think that's actually really helpful.
It popped into my mind.
No, that's really helpful. And one thing I'll mention too is, even though those are the average ages of those students in our center, I do see, I already mentioned, high school age students. Those actually tend to be some of the students who have snuck under the radar for a longer period of time, and they need some of that visualizing and verbalizing work to help them do better with that novel reading, or reading Romeo and Juliet, or writing those essays, because they've been able to get by with the smaller amounts of text. But as the amount increases, they're needing some help. So
Thank you again.
I know I don't want to take up too much time and leave some time for questions, but just to touch on some of the research we've been involved in. Again, if you have more interest in this, let me know. I can send you all of the abstracts. I'm going to skip past a bunch of them on this page, but a few to highlight for you all. Our research with the University of Washington. This is, I believe it's in Seattle specifically. Students with dyslexia benefiting from our Seeing Stars program. Here, you'll notice just quickly that students who were part of this cohort, they actually received 160 hours, or about 8 weeks of a summer program with us. Before they did instruction with us, though, you'll see each of these lines either almost stagnant or actually dipping. And these are representing these students' basic reading skills, which is kind of like fluency, their reading and phonics pieces. They actually dropped when they weren't doing instruction. But as soon as we started instruction, you see a linear growth pattern throughout instruction as we measured this. So we consider our instruction a dose response method. So the more doses we do, the better gains you can expect in a student. And that's why you often will hear me talking about the hours of instruction that a student needs, because I kind of judge that dose or prescription based on how big those gaps are. This is another piece of research involved with the University of Washington. And on this one, students were doing that Seeing Stars program. Students did have that diagnosis of dyslexia for those 8 weeks. And you'll see they did MRI scans for them. And in this result, they showed that not only were their reading skills improved by about 1 full grade level in that time period, but the MRIs showed that there's large scale changes in that white matter conductivity. Dr. Ron can jump in and comment on these later if he wants, but I personally take this to show that not only are we helping with those reading skills, but we are literally helping to change the brain and how that brain is working for our students. And I'm going to jump ahead really fast here to show one other piece here that is really interesting for those students with dyslexia. This is done at Georgetown Medical Center, I believe. But what you see here are, again, these are fMRI scans for students before they started reading instruction with us, after they started reading instruction with us. So you see large growth over that period. And then when we did follow up with them 8 weeks later, you'll see that they were holding on to those changes in their brain matter growth, so or connectivity growth. And that's really, really important to me. Parents will often ask, well, is this actually going to lead to change, or do we have to do this every summer or keep working with you all the time? And the answer is no. We do that intensive intervention, maybe some little follow-up sessions, but this shows without any follow-up, we can have that lasting effect. Just to quickly touch on some of the research for our students on the autism spectrum. One of our big partners is the University of Alabama at Birmingham. And here we can see a cohort of students who are diagnosed on the autism spectrum, benefiting from the use of that visualizing and verbalizing program in dual coding theory towards increasing their reading comprehension specifically. So these students benefited in reading comprehension. You'll take note quickly, the average standard scores for that comprehension rose from 77.5 to 87.9. That is a huge jump. Compared to a group that received no instruction, their comprehension actually dropped over that time period. And then, as similar to some of the other pieces we've seen, their brain activation here with those fMRIs showing that before instruction, when they were trying to do a reading comprehension task, we see much smaller activity in the growth than afterwards. Same goes for this resting state MRIs that they did before intervention and after intervention. I think these were about the same cohort of students, but we see a big change in the activation there. So what questions do you all have? I know I was kind of just rushing through a lot of this and didn't want to get too bogged down.
Yeah, feel free to speak up or put it in the chat box. It looks like we did get one question in the chat saying, can I get these pages emailed to me? I guess assuming either the PowerPoint or the research pages.
Yeah, I can send all of the above. So if you wanted to, you can probably personally message me in Zoom and I can take down your email, or that works too. And I can make sure we get in touch.
Yeah, and we'll be sending out the recording to all the attendees who registered, and it'll be up on our Brain Center YouTube channel as well. So anyone else, feel free to ask questions. Dr. Ron has some things he wanted to say.
Yeah, Andrew, if you could just email me what you just had there, that PDF or whatever, that would be great. I'd love to have that research on hand.
Yeah, will do, Dave. I got your email.
Okay, Andrew, question about Erland syndrome. You mentioned dyslexia, and I didn't know if there's any screening for that, because in reading, that seems to be a real issue. There's controversy on the Erland syndrome, but I know, Bridget, who works here for us, she's got it, and she's very very up to date on all the information on it. I didn't know if you guys ever screened or did anything for Erland syndrome.
We don't screen for it, although I definitely get a number of students who have that diagnosis. I'm looking actually right now in our research because, again, I don't know all the details of the studies, but I know that one of them specifically says that visual components, in terms of how the sight visual, let's see, abnormal vision motion processing is not a cause of dyslexia. This is one of the pieces of research we've been involved in. And I don't know exactly how they gathered who counted as having the abnormal vision motion processing or not. But this was another one done at Georgetown University. And they, their conclusion was that visual processing, I think this is through the scanning of the brains to measure that they also benefited from instruction the same as anyone else did. So that wasn't a hindrance towards our intervention anyways. It could be a hindrance towards others, but that's a really good question. I don't know if that matches up specifically with Erland syndrome. Definitely not a specialist there, but I know it's part of that research.
It seems to be, but I think that this is an area that we need to look at. Another area that is very valid. I was just speaking with her mother this morning about her son. I think he's 9, and this is that he just has no desire to work hard. If it's hard, he just quits and won't go forward. And I think there is a book out that I think I'd like to show you guys. A Nation of Wimps. It's really a good book. And it's like we've got a whole cadre of children who don't want to work hard. They would rather just be given to them, or just play their video games and be left alone. So what do you do about motivation for children that just aren't interested in working or in trying to accomplish something? Her issues with him are mostly around math. And math is becoming more and more a reading issue because they're putting everything into those kind of contexts. But still, the concepts of math and number relationships and everything like that. What are your thoughts about how we get young people, which may have some issues, to learn the value of hard work and sticking with something for a period of time? What do you do with those kids that just refuse to do the work when you get them there?
Well, the answer is it depends on the student. And one of the reasons that is I've found through my experience, and we actually have this as part of the training for our staff, is that, and I can't remember all of them, but kind of like you hear about love languages in society, students have kind of like motivation languages. Some students are really motivated by hearing that praise from their parents specifically, like they are seeking that parent approval. Some students just thrive off of personal connection, and sometimes that means that they're working really hard towards a 3-minute chit-chat break with one of our other clinicians, and they just really love that personal connection. Other students, they need a big prize, that big new video game that they're trying to earn. And so each student I've found has kind of that language that speaks to them for motivation. But it really goes down to the core of it is most of the time when we see that task aversion, wimpiness, if you will, it's normally caused because there is that underlying difficulty. And so the number one thing for us is creating an atmosphere of trust and safety where they can fail, but they feel comfortable to fail, because the only way they're going to learn is through making some of those mistakes. And sometimes we have students who are harder nuts to crack, and it takes us, a number of days to get them to open up, to get them to feel that safety. But that's our number one job. And I know, Julie and Brooke, y'all can definitely attest to that, working with students in your centers as well. So there's a lot of different strategies that we use, and we just have to look at that student.
Well, that's really awesome. It sounds like you personalize it, and then you have that emphasis on the safety piece, which is very important in fostering a learning environment.
If I can get in on that question, it's definitely individualized for each student, and I'm going to say, perhaps you didn't necessarily mean it this way, Dr. Ron, but there's really no such thing as just a student who won't work. There's always going to be some underlying psychological or neurological reason for it, and in some cases it is going to be a parenting kind of thing, more just this social cultural thing, and that's unfortunate, and you got to teach values. But in a lot of cases, ADHD, neurologically, there are underpinnings to a lack of motivation behavior, due to the dysfunctions in the dopamine reward system, so there's reasons for it. And psychologically, we can find those traits as well. And I think Andrew touched on challenges. When kids are really challenged with something, I often see that they struggle with the motivation because it's too hard for them. So you got to break it down and make it easy for them. And then if you look at behavioral psychology, the applied behavior analysis stuff is pretty effective at increasing motivation and performance simply through using consequences and rewards and that kind of standard behavioral intervention. There's all sorts of ways to address that, and each student it's going to be different in terms of whatever the either neurological or psychological underpinning of that behavior is.
I think you're totally right, Dave. I haven't seen your name come across. Who are you? I love your
Yeah, no,
input.
I've been here before and we had a discussion. It's been a while, but and I was actually at one of your recent ones too. So I think this is my third or fourth. But in our first one, we had a little discussion. I'm the chief executive officer of Sacramento Autistic Spectrum and Special Needs Alliance. We're a nonprofit in Sacramento, California. Yeah, so we do different things, but yeah, we talked before about the brain scans and all that stuff, and I'm pretty into that. That was the first meeting I was at, probably, I don't know, a year ago, 6 months ago, or something.
Right, and we're going to talk in March, in April, on autistic spectrum disorder, current research out there, so that will be a good one. You want to introduce one of the concepts that we've just come across here lately, and we've been processing this for years, is there's organic issues underlying anxiety, depression, and attention issues.
Absolutely.
And we've I'm putting together, I got a research team on it right now. We're going to put the presentation together, then do a paper on it. But on abnormal labs that come back and how that could be associated with attention, anxiety, and depressive issues. And it stems from, low iron or low vitamin D or this kind of stuff. So I want to create a cheat sheet for parents and for every adult and for every therapist out there to understand that when you get a set of labs, doctors are very poor about giving you feedback as to what they could do psychologically. And I think this is something very valid. And I ask for labs as often as I can just to look to make sure we don't have something that's underlying it. We know the sleep is terrible in these children. Now, is it a mineral issue that we hear about so often causing their sleep issues? Well, that should be addressed. And if we can find those things out, I think we're going to include in there also who you refer to if they came up deficient in XYZ, whatever. So just something we're going to do in March.
March 22nd, 12 to 1 p.m. Central Time. We will be discussing that. And then April 19th, 12 to 1 p.m. Central Time, we will be discussing the research on autism.
100%. I go through tons and tons of research, and autism is clearly a multi-system physiological condition, not just a brain-based condition. And I think ADHD in that direction as well. And when we're looking at these conditions probably being combinations of a multitude of genetic as well as environmental components, you're absolutely correct. And we have to look at least autism as an underlying biological condition, do labs, and look at all those things. The research is very clear that there are usually metabolic issues in autism. There are usually gastrointestinal issues, and these things are at least 50-60% of people with autism have these, and we need to treat those. I look at a lot of supplementation and different types of methodology as well to treat those things. A lot of research in the mainstream understanding of autism is at least a decade behind the current research, and they just still recognize it as a behavioral psychological condition, which is certainly doing it a disservice at this point.
Dave, you know what you just did?
It's like the echo.
Oh, echo, sorry. I said, I would like to invite you to co-present that with me on autism. Would you be interested?
Yeah, I'd love to.
Okay, great. You've got my email,
put
put my email in there and everything, and we can get together offline, design this. I love your expertise in this area, another research slanted individual that we have to look at the research, and I want to get this out there, and I really like what you're saying. So I'd love to co-present with you on this, and let's put a great presentation together, because this has been an area I've done a lot of research in over the years, and I really love to help this population. Most all of them have ADHD, comorbid with ADHD as well. So it hits all of our children out there, and so many. We have 19 special schools in Houston that kind of cater to the autistic population. So we have a large population here. So I welcome you aboard and glad to have you here, and glad you were at this one as well.
That's exciting.
Yeah, I got in late, so I missed most of Andrew's presentation. I was in an IEP meeting. I do a lot of those IEP meetings for our clients, but yeah, I got here late. But I want to get that research from Andrew. I'm actually we do a lot of advocacy, and so I'm working with the client in my area, and we're trying to get the school district to pay for Lindamood-Bell sensory cognitive, as well as the academy program, because the student's really struggling. So that research you presented is going to be helpful for me if I need to go in front of a judge and convince a judge why the method is necessary for this student and present evidence base for it.
Yeah, it's sad when it has to get to that step, but you know, there's a lot of students out there that need good advocates like yourself, and yeah, we do partner with the school districts sometimes, you know, whether it's through that mediation or the schools will just hire us for that too. So it's always good when we can help another student.
Excellent. So this is where we love to do this. We love to bring people together. It takes a village to raise a child, and we're a good village here, and we just got to get the word out. What were you saying?
I was just saying our time's almost up.
I'll let you finish.
Well, our time is coming up to an end. I just want to say we will be uploading this recording to YouTube. So if y'all want to watch it again, I know there's a lot of really great, interesting information. So we'll have that up as soon as possible. I really thank you all. I appreciate y'all for attending today. And I hope that y'all can be with us next month. What was it? March 22nd, Wednesday at 12 p.m. Central Time.
And I want to thank all of y'all. I mean, that was very, very informative. I certainly appreciate